In the name of God, lover, beloved, and spirit of love. Amen. Most of us take our sight for granted, don't we? I know I never gave it a second thought, and then I hit 40, and I got eye migraines, and now I have glasses for reading. I'm sure that many of you can relate to that. The only way that I can actually read my sermon on a Sunday without my glasses on is because I put it in a very, very large font. We don't tend to think too much about our sight until something goes wrong. Of course, we can't read this passage here at St. David's without thinking of a beloved member of our congregation who is blind. And he and I have had a good conversation about this reading this week. We've learned much from him sharing his experience with us of what it's like not to be able to see. It has certainly given me another perspective, and I'm very grateful for that. As Jesus went along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" "Neither this man nor his parents sinned," said Jesus, "but this happened so the works of God might be displayed in him." After saying this, he spat on the ground, made some mud with the saliva, and put it on the man's eyes. "Go," he said to him, "wash in the pool of Siloam." So the man went and washed and came home seeing. Our story today then goes on for quite a number of verses, 41 in fact. The healing appears in the very first few lines, and then the rest of the story seems not to be about the healing at all, but about people's reactions to the healing, and so many, many questions. How did it happen? Where is this healer? How can a sinner perform a miracle? What have you to say about him? Is this your son? Was he actually born blind? Do you believe in the Son of Man? Who sinned that he should be blind in the first place? There is questioning and disbelief and blaming and accusations, more questioning, and then final banishment. This passage in John has often been commented on as an isolated drama, neatly divided into 7 scenes that narrate the aftermath of Jesus' healing of the man born blind, who never asked to be healed in the first place. However, it's important to see it as part of the gospel as a whole, because when we read on to the following chapter, we see that it is Jesus himself who comments on and provides the interpretation of the healing. This is a reoccurring structural pattern in John's gospel. Jesus performs a sign, which is followed by a dialogue, and then commentary from Jesus that provides the theological framework through which the reader, us, is to interpret the meaning of the sign. The actual miracle itself is actually narrated very, very briefly, because it's not the miracle that is the critical point, however wonderful and amazing it is. Rather, the miracle is the sign that points to something beyond itself, to what the encounter with Jesus signifies. Very much like the Samaritan woman in our reading last week, the blind man grows in his understanding of who Jesus is. This time, however, it doesn't happen through direct dialogue with Jesus, but instead through the blind man's witness of his encounter with Jesus. It's through his interrogation by the Pharisees, that the blind man repeatedly tells his story and comes to know that Jesus is from God. Jesus said, "For judgment I have come into this world, so that the blind will see and those who see will become blind." It's a bit of a brain teaser. The blind will see and those who see will become blind. When I was ordained, I was given a cross necklace as a gift from Presbytery, and I'm wearing it today. It has red beads on the string and a beautiful Celtic cross on the end. And it's a very precious gift, and it reminds me of a very precious time. Now, this cross sometimes gets twisted and sticks out at a funny angle, and for the life of me, I couldn't work out how to fix it. And you know the person who is the only person who has been able to fix it for me? That person is Christo. Each time my cross gets twisted, I go to him, and in a matter of moments, he fixes it. It is amazing how those of us who can see sometimes can't see, and those of us who can't see sometimes can. In this passage, when Jesus describes the blind man's sight, the word used in the Greek is blepo, which means to see or perceive or discern. This word, blepo, suggests seeing something physical with spiritual results, perception. It carries what is seen into the non-physical realm, so a person can take the needed action to respond or to be aware or to be alert. In other words, Jesus uses a word that implies something much deeper than physical sight here. It implies perception and wisdom. The blind man can't see, but then he can, physically as well as spiritually. He can see who Jesus is. And yet the Pharisees, as knowledgeable and steeped in their religion as they are, cannot see. They can't see who Jesus is. It's very easy for us to bag the Pharisees. How can they not see? How can they not see who Jesus is? Let's be honest, we also do this sometimes with people who disagree with us. How can they not see? How can they not see what seems so painfully obvious to us? It's so easy to point the finger, isn't it? And live in a very simplistic life of right and wrong and light and dark, sight and blindness, and fail to see where we too may be blind, where we too might be failing to see clearly. Many of you may be familiar with the game Jenga. Does that mean anything to anybody? There's a few nods, a few shakes of head. Okay, so Jenga is a game about this big. It's a tower of individual wooden blocks. And in the game, the participants take turns to remove the blocks. And the idea is you have to remove a block without the whole tower coming crashing down. So the loser is the person who, when they remove a block, makes the tower crash down. I've actually seen life-size Jenga games, so you can put it in your garden and play it like that. Now, the reaction of the Pharisees today reminds me of this game. Often what is behind this behavior, I think, is fear. If I let myself see that, then what else will I see, and what else will be challenged about my narrative and the way I see the world? If I remove one block in the Jenga tower, then I'm afraid that the whole lot is going to come crashing down, and then I will have nothing to hold on to, no security. The disciples also fall into this trap. In their desperate need for security, they even blame the parents. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" And we do this too, don't we? How often have we heard a reaction to pain as "pray harder"? Everything happens for a reason. God only gives us what we can bear. I received a few of these well-meaning platitudes when I was going through the cancer treatment. In our broken humanity, we need to make sense of the world. We need a clear and explainable link between what is happening and why. But although these words are often said with good intention and the desire to be helpful and caring, by viewing the world and pain in this way, we turn genuine struggles of the human condition into solvable formulas of cause and effect, which then gets warped into the idea that if something bad is happening to us, it is because God has determined that we deserve it. I've spoken before about a woman called Kate Bowler, who is a professor at Duke University, and she was diagnosed with cancer in her mid-30s when she had a young child. Her first book is called Everything Happens for a Reason and Other Lies I Have Loved. And in it, she tackles head on this need to have simple answers to complex problems. As a good friend said to me recently, every complex problem has a simple answer, and it is always the wrong answer. Jesus doesn't buy into the link between illness or disability and sin at all. In fact, he says in no uncertain terms, no one sinned. This man's blindness is not because someone sinned. It doesn't work like that. We are not at all good at living in the mystery, living in the not knowing. But when we truly look and truly see, this is often what we find. No easy answers, or no answers at all. It's a really scary business, this seeing, honestly seeing. Ultimately, our story today concludes with the town members throwing the blind man out. They refused to accept that he'd been healed by Jesus and that he has been changed. They see his transformation as a threat. They see Jesus as a threat because he threatens their narrative, their understanding of the world, and their place in it. Our Lenten devotional this year encourages us to ask honest questions for deeper faith. Are we willing to turn the eye on ourselves and honestly reflect on where we may be unwilling to see? When does our doctrine lead to isolation and exile? We live in a world in which we attempt to stabilize and fix, to protect and insulate ourselves from pain and from fear and from change. And yet, in unexplicable, miraculous moments, God intrudes among us, comes to us, and there is healing and there is vision. May we, both individually and as a community, open our minds and our hearts to these miraculous moments, and as a result to seeing clearly and seeing honestly. Amen. Let's have a moment of stillness.